Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye, all rise. Be seated. First case, the people of the city of Alexandria versus William Robert Coronavirus and Stanley Marcus Coronavirus, members of the dreaded coronavirus family of viruses.
Mr. Porter, your opening statement, please.
Your Honor, counsel, members of the jury, I would like to say that this is an open and shut case. I really would. To be quite honest and perfectly frank, completely honest. But everyone without exception in common threads woven by the pilgrim and the Puritan, the fisherman and the farmer, indeed the immigrant and even the Yankee, here in this place called America, has a right to a day in court. And so we suffer the slight inconvenience, more of a sacrifice, to afford to each and all their rights to due process and equal protection. And I do not for 1 minute, not even for one little second, believe that you would switch places with anyone in the performance of this duty of good citizenship. Today, I submit to you, not what I believe, although believe I might. Not what I imagine, although imagine I will. Not what I hope, dream, desire, or even pray. But as confirmed, verified, and established by credible medical authorities, notable experts in their respective fields, that getting this virus is a function of whether someone's got it, how long they're exposed, and how much they are shedding. And according to our reputed public health authorities, it was known from a very early time during this public health crisis that this virus was thought to spread mainly from person to person, between people who were in close contact with one another within about 6 feet, through respiratory droplets produced when an infected person coughs or sneezes. God bless you. God bless you. These droplets can land in the mouths or noses of people who are nearby or possibly be inhaled into the lungs of others to fatal effect. I shouldn't have to repeat this, members of the jury, because you already know what you have seen with your very own eyes. The data speak for themselves. However, today the evidence in this case will show and demonstrate beyond a reasonable doubt, as is the standard in court, that both defendants, William Robert Coronavirus and Stanley Marcus Coronavirus, members of the dreaded coronavirus family of cold-blooded killer viruses, both notorious for killing without even a photo cat, had possessed a long, vexatious criminal history of committing similar crimes dating back to the SARS outbreak in Hong Kong, setting off a crime wave of infections and vicious killing spree. Cold-blooded murderers. Members of the jury, in November 2002, doctors in the Guangdong province of the southeastern China began to see the very first cases of what would become known as SARS, or severe acute respiratory syndrome. And over the next several months, some 8,096 people in 26 countries contracted the new viral illness, leading to 774 deaths. 8,000 people infected. That compares to the 8,000 lives that were lost to the Ebola virus between March 2014 and January 2015. Lost to a 90% case fatality rate virus. Lives lost. Unacceptable losses of life to these infectious diseases. As with the most recent pandemic, credible authorities have now determined that slow reporting of initial SARS cases helped spread the illness. We all know about the asymptomatic infection. Those cases that were underreported, people that were running around and didn't know that they were infected, and only globally enforced medical practice eventually helped to curb, end, and disrupt that first outbreak. set off by the coronavirus family. Cold-blooded killers. At that time, the reason for slow reporting of SARS had been complicated. I admit. Doctors had never seen the viral illness before, like now. And at first, those in Guangdong province thought the SARS cases they were seeing might be just an atypical pneumonia. There were also reports that officials may have encouraged doctors not to report cases when SARS began to spread in Beijing. And even today, we are sadly all aware of the pattern of obfuscation we are faced with the Beijing government in this pandemic crisis, this COVID-19 pandemic crisis. They won't even let us into their lab in Wuhan to continue to investigate. I need not say anything wrong. And once again, according to official reports, again from China, in proximal origin, we were hit with this virus that was met with silence and spread unchecked. Not to be political, but somebody was in charge when this happened. And denials for days, weeks, then months that led to more deaths, more infections, more stress, and indeed more loneliness. Very early in this outbreak, world public health officials had confirmed that COVID-19 is not SARS. And although some believe otherwise, it is not influenza. It is a brand new virus with its own characteristics. For example, COVID-19 transmission in children appears to be limited compared with influenza, while the clinical picture differs from SARS. This is what world public health authorities have told us. This is not what I see. But on December 30th, 2019, 3 bronchoalveolar lavage samples were collected from a patient with pneumonia of unknown etiology. That's science talk for origins, where it comes from. A surveillance definition that was established following the SARS outbreak of 2002-2003 in Wuhan Jinyintan Hospital. Real-time PCR assays on these samples were positive for, we know, pan-beta coronavirus, establishing an irrefutable connection to the dreaded coronavirus family of cold-blooded killer viruses, most notorious for killing without even a thought of care, falling prey so sadly on the most vulnerable in our society. Using Illumina and nanopore sequencing, the whole genome sequences of the virus were acquired, isolated. Bioinformatic analysis indicated that the virus had features typical of the coronavirus family, members of whom are here in this courtroom today. Viruses, cold-blooded killer viruses, most notorious for killing without even a thought or care. And it was further established beyond a reasonable doubt, members of the jury, that these vicious killers had indeed irrefutably belonged to the beta coronavirus 2B lineage. Alignment of the full-length genome sequence of the COVID-19 virus and other available genomes of beta coronavirus showed beyond a reasonable doubt the closest relationship was with the bat SARS-like coronavirus strain bat CoV rat G13. Identity 96%. You can't get any closer than that. Fine members of the jury, this is all very technical evidence. Generally, the evidence that may only be understood truly and deeply by experts, scientists, and clinicians who have dedicated years of work and study in their respective fields. But members of the jury, today I need you. I need you to know this criminal history in the most vivid and excruciating details, because this is the criminal history and character of these killers and heartless souls, William Robert Coronavirus and Stanley Mark Coronavirus. Members of the dreaded coronavirus family of viruses who lay in wait, beset upon prominent members of our fair community, innocent victims, people of good character, people that you knew, I knew, pure as the driven snow, driven as the lamb, and preyed upon in premeditated, calculated assaults that today in the great state of Virginia alone, our beloved Commonwealth have bound over 23,000 fatalities. By July 2023, our state public health officials in Richmond had confirmed tragedy that since March 7, 2020, with the first report of COVID-19 in any affected area of the state, a U.S. Marine, the few and the proud, serving this great nation and stationed on Fort Belvoir in Northern Virginia. There had been a total of 2,323,255 confirmed cases of infection right here in Virginia, or more than 1/4 of the entire population of this state, or half of those who voted in the 2020 election. These cold-blooded and heartless killers, William Robert Coronavirus and Stanley Marcus Coronavirus, members of the dreaded coronavirus family, had seized upon the first victim for infection on March 7th and had claimed the lives of some 23,769 people in this state alone by July 2023. Let me help you to develop a clear picture of that. Imagine wiping out the entire population of the city of Stanton, Virginia, the hometown of former President Woodrow Wilson, who brought us the League of Nations, and who had himself, while president during the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918, also been infected himself by the pandemic virus during the peace talks to end that war. A virus that had been attributed to between 50 and 100 million fatalities worldwide. A crime, I say to you, members of the jury, against humanity. Our public health officials down in the city of Richmond inform us, members of the jury, that before the pandemic in 2019, nearly 70,000 deaths occurred right here in Virginia, according to data obtained from death certificates. And because of this coronavirus, examining just the excess deaths that had occurred by March 2021, the first anniversary of the pandemic declaration, although Virginia would have expected to see 70,704 total deaths in that year, instead had actually experienced a preliminary total of 82,772 deaths of all-cause mortality, an excess of 12,068 deaths, or 17.1% from the expected total. 17.1% more people died while this virus was present. Members of the killer coronavirus family. Their killers are here today in this courtroom for your examination. Members of the jury, I don't have to tell you, photos and videos from 2019 feel like they were taken in another era now. The last vacation before a pandemic. The last birthday with friends before a pandemic. The last holiday with extended family members no longer here before a pandemic. Well, it was different for everyone. We all lost something. You did, I did too. It was a collective suffering. It was a collective sacrifice. It was years filled with losses of life and the loss of living for all of us. But in that loss, members of the jury, we saw how much there was to gain too in appreciation, respect, and gratitude for one another. You know, members of the jury, finding the light in the darkness is a very American thing to do. That's what we're doing here today. In fact, it may be the most American thing that we do. And today, as members of the jury, you have a great responsibility, a great task placed on your plate to bring justice as we examine just a few selected cases that had occurred right here in our beloved Commonwealth in our beloved community, perhaps with people that we know personally. Seek, and ye shall find, the Bible says. Ask, questions shall be asked. Knock, and doors shall be opened unto you. But in Virginia, during pandemic, dreaded members of the coronavirus family came knocking at some doors, showing up like a thief in the night, and taking some far too soon go home to be with Jesus in heaven. But today, fine members of the jury, the evidence will irrefutably show, demonstrated and established beyond a reasonable doubt that these cold-blooded and heartless killers, William Robert Coronavirus and Stanley Marcus Coronavirus, members of the dreaded coronavirus family of viruses present before you today, have been seen entering the grocery store where one George Grayson, a devoutly religious man, sings on the choir, and member of a community in the city of Alexandria in good standing, had gone to obtain some groceries just to feed his loving family during a pandemic when we were locking down. His loving family, including a wife, a little girl, and 2 young boys. Each year, even in the great state of Virginia, approximately 47 children die each year because of abuse and neglect. In fact, as of January 1st, 2023, fine members of the jury, public health officials at UNICEF inform us that they had determined from a database, including data from 118 nations worldwide, that by December 2023, 0.4% of the worldwide fatalities had occurred in children and adolescents under 20 years of age, just like the Gravesend boys. And that over 17,400 young people, 53% of whom were just mere adolescents, ages 10 to 19, like the Gravesend boys, and 47% trafficked were just children, ages 0 to 9. A global tragedy. Just young children, little babes, like the sons of George Gravesend, with the rest of their lives ahead, heads full of dreams, hopes, aspirations, and desires, but cut short all too soon by these cold-blooded and heartless killers here today before you. William Robert Coronavirus and Stanley Marcus Coronavirus, members of the dreaded coronavirus family virus. The evidence will show and demonstrate beyond a reasonable doubt, members of the jury, that they, George Gravesend, and the members of the Gravesend family had done everything that they possibly could have been told. And they had done everything that they could possibly have done to avoid coming into the path of these vicious and malicious killers. But the evidence will also show you today that try as they might, even with the transformative powers of prayer, they were still left vulnerable to infections that took George Gravesend as their host to enter their family home, knocking at their door, infecting his loving wife and hospitalizing his 2 precious little boys who hung on for torturous weeks, clinging desperately to life's breath on respirators. What were the odds, I ask you, members of the jury? What were the odds? The evidence will show, demonstrate, establish, members of the jury, that these vicious killers had returned again, but this time seizing upon their pastor, Reverend Don Davidson, an elderly man, age 73 at the time, and a prominent member of our fair community, seizing upon him at the most vulnerable of moments while he had been undergoing an invasive medical procedure at the Inova Care Facility out there in Fairfax. An infection that he would acquire and bring home to his loving wife, Audrey, where they would suffer with infections wrought by the hand of these vicious killers. You will hear their testimony and the testimony of eyewitnesses, members of the medical and science communities who can see the invisible, members of the science and medical community who can feel the intangible and even though impossible, seemingly, have truly brought us a miracle against this invisible enemy until today. Heaven sent from above indeed. And finally, the state will prove, members of the jury, that these defendants, William Robert Coronavirus and Stanley Marcus Coronavirus, members of the dreaded coronavirus family of viruses, had admitted, but then recanted their complicity in this heinous crime. Now, let's get down to the big law. Your verdict is going to depend on what you think of the sworn testimony. Not what I think, because what I think doesn't count. You're the jury. It's your job to decide who's telling the truth. The truth, that's what verdict means. Did you know that? That's what verdict means. Verdict means truth. It's a word that came down from merry old England, and all our old ancestors say. We shall be asking you to return the truth, a verdict of murder in the first degree for William Robert Coronavirus, and a verdict of accessory to first degree murder for Stanley Marcus Coronavirus, two members of the coronavirus family of killer viruses engaged in committing these most heinous crimes that have deeply impacted our bad community, even right here in Alexandria, Virginia. Reached out and touched the lives of George Graveson, reached out and touched the lives of Pastor Davidson, and even reached down all the way to Chesterfield to claim the life of one bishop whose infection case we shall examine, who had acquired this virus set upon by these vicious killers before the very first Easter in the pandemic, dying before the very first Easter in the pandemic declaration, along with 30 other members of the Black Pentecostal faith. But I don't have to tell you because you saw it. You felt it. You read about it in the papers. You saw it on your television screens and computer screens in the news. You experienced it, and today it is your duty, ladies and gentlemen, of the jury to see that justice, true justice, is done. Nothing further, y'all.
Counselor, do you wish to make a statement?
This message was approved by Major Mike Webb. Honest. This has been a Filmways presentation, darling.
And y'all come back now.